Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is The Witcher 2 Dark Mode video walkthrough, and this is To the Temple in the Prologue. So I'm going to loot all these houses, do all the fetch quests with the soldiers just to get some experience, some money, some items, all that good stuff, but I'm not going to show it, guys. I'm going to do a little crossfade so that we can keep the guide, as streamlined and as efficient as possible. What I will be showing though is some of the later houses a little further on in my escapade to steal things. And I'm going to talk, because this is quite a long video, about the difficulty and about the spells or the arts, or I don't even know what they're called. That just goes to show how much, I've been playing this game for the last few days, absolutely loving it, but I'm still not up on all the lingo and all the, the canon and fiction specific things. So Geralt has the access to a bunch of spells. The one I'm using is called Ard, and it stuns enemies. Very rarely it will allow you to instantly kill them, which is the best ability in the game for me, because it gets rid of even the biggest enemies very quickly, if you're lucky. There's also the ability to lay a trap, which I used quite a lot on my first playthrough, but didn't use so much on my second, because it's essentially only really useful against the people that Ard doesn't stun correctly. Because it traps them in place, it allows you to beat them up quite a lot. It can be really useful against the big spiders, the Arakas, and the Endregas, and the Endrega Queens. There's the ability to fire fire from your hand, called Igni, which is a move that doesn't have too much range until I assume you upgrade it to give it range, but it's one of those spells that can set people on fire and will no doubt at higher levels set groups of people on fire. So it's kind of an atrocious, poison-esque strategy that you can use if you should choose to. I'm not going to. It's not really a spell I use too much. Then there is the Quen, which you've already seen, which puts an electric barrier around you for a certain amount of time but stops your vigor from regenerating. A lot of people don't understand how Quen works. They don't really understand how it protects you, and from what I've seen from experience, it's pretty much one hit it'll do, depending on difficulty. This is all being based off of testing on dark mode. If you put Quen on, it will protect you from give or take one good hit, and then you have to recast it, but it will always protect you from one hit. So as long as you have the vigor to keep casting it, feasibly you can take damage on Quen and never have your life bar affected. It's not the most graceful way to play, but it's definitely effective, and a lot of people are going to use it because it's definitely the easiest way to play. But once again, I'm not going to use Quen too much because it's not really my thing. And then the final one is called, I think, Axe, which is the ability to take over people's minds, to kind of brainwash them for a short amount of time, to fight for you and to help you. And that's a spell that could be useful when you upgrade it, but I've never really used it too much because, once again, it's not my thing. This is all preference, this, guys. If you want to use it and you think it's super effective, I completely believe you, because the cool thing about this game, as I've replayed it twice now and seen the depth and the potential, is there are 1,000,001 ways to play. There'll be a whole bunch of different ways that are just as effective as my methods, even more so effective, less effective. It's all preference based, and there's so many ways to do so many things, and it reminds me a lot of Dark Souls in ways, only nowhere near as, open to the player's influence, because it's a much more linear game and it's a much more linear as far as its mechanics go, but there's still that element of challenge, mystery and fun there that I got from Dark Souls, just not to the same extent or for the same amount of time. And there's also a Mass Effect element to it for me, where the first Mass Effect game's universe was so dense and interesting to me that I just fell in love with it, and I fell into it and I embraced it, and I really enjoyed it. I read everything, all the journals and stuff, and that was what I liked so much about Mass Effect, because we all know the gameplay it's kind of shitty at times and really bad performance-wise anyway. And this game reminds me of that a lot. There are a lot of issues with the game mechanically. This is one of the buggiest games I've played all year, unfortunately, but it's got such a vast and deep legend to it, and it thrusts you in the middle without, tons of exposition, and it kind of just lets you figure it out yourself on your own terms. And a lot of games wouldn't do that. A lot of games would think that they would be overfacing you with all this exposition, but this is a game where the universe is already so well established thanks to the books in the previous game that it's not its job to tell you the story, it's your job to want to learn the story, and I think that's quite an interesting concept, and I do enjoy it a lot. But onto the dark mode difficulty and how it differs. So the description says very hard, very high challenge. You know, certain unique attributes and things have changed from other difficulties. And the big thing you're going to find on dark mode is the dark specific equipment. There's a full suit of armour with 2 weapons on each chapter that only appears on dark mode, and they are arguably the best items in the game at that point when they turn up. On top of that, you have quick time events which don't show up on easy for some reason, which I found out the other day. I'm not too sure what that's like. I don't know if they show up on normal, actually. It might just be on dark mode or hard mode, which is really stupid, actually, because they come out of nowhere. They're not frequent enough for you to ever expect them, so they will catch you off guard. Especially if you're not paying attention, which I wasn't for much of this walkthrough. Because cutscenes are to be skipped once you've seen them, in my opinion, but there you go. And this game does let you skip a lot of stuff, but some of it doesn't, because it's quick time eventy and that kind of bullshit. On top of that, the enemies do massive damage, and I don't think they take that much more damage, because even playing on easy, which I was yesterday, the enemies still took a beating. So I don't think your damage is any different on dark, because the enemies still kind of take a beating, but the damage that they dish out is immensely different. For instance, if I get hit by these drowners at this moment in the game, 2 to 3 hits, sometimes often just 2, will kill me. Guaranteed. They do that much damage, and that's not even talking about if they hit me from behind. So, with this particular enemy, you want to use the silver sword because it's a monster, and you want to always get the first hit. First hit into stunlock will beat these enemies effortlessly, and it'll keep the game pretty simple. But dark mode differences. Massive damage to you, nothing really specific with enemies. You know, the dark armors, I think that's pretty much it. It does seem to have a reputation, this difficulty, because the game is kind of brutal at times, and unforgiving is probably the best way to describe it, and it is. And when you combine that with the shitty autosave, because it wants you to manual save, it can be hellish. A good example of this was the fight that we're about to come across, which is going to happen up the top of these stairs, I think. So I can talk about it now. It is indeed. Here we go. So I didn't realise you could manual save at this point because I wasn't interested in saving. I was learning a game. So the save point is here, from this room. There's not a save point until the end of this level, which in this video I'm going to make look very easy, but it isn't, folks. It really isn't. Unless you have an understanding of the combat and you've played the game, this is really hard. The next fight, I was stuck for about an hour on my first playthrough because it's 3 guys in a tiny room. You've got so little life, they don't die. This fight is insane. But I've played the game now, so I know about the usefulness of bombs, you know. And that looks like a pathetic fight, because I used 2 of the Samoom bombs. But when I was trying to do it on my first playthrough, I was getting destroyed. And I didn't save after it, because I didn't realise you could. So I got all the way to the next courtyard, and then in the next courtyard I got killed, and I had to do this fight again. And I only figured out after this section, once I did it on 1 life, which I don't recommend because it was very challenging to someone who was, you know, very new to the game, that you could save anywhere. And then from that moment onwards, I still forgot to do it, so I was constantly losing progress. And I cannot stress the importance of saving. Like, if you're playing on PC, you have no excuse. It's 1 button. It's just consoles procrastinate on everything because they're inferior, and thus it's a bit more annoying to do. But if you can get into the habit of it, you will never ever have to blame checkpoints again, unless we're talking about the final boss and one of the many issues with this game. But I'll talk about that a bit later because it pisses me off. So this fight appears simple. Use your R to stun them, divide and conquer, hit and run. Watch what I do, emulate it if you're having problems, and you should be okay. Once the battle ends, save, and then push on to the next fight. This is a buggy game, guys. It's immensely buggy. I've had levels not load in, so I've been running around Glitchland with people to talk to and all sorts of madness happening. You know, I've had NPCs not spawn, I've had NPCs spawning walls, I've had all sorts of things. I've had problems talking to stuff, problems triggering script, problems pulling out my sword, problems of every kind. And it happens a lot, and it's really sad because it's such an ambitious and interesting game, but technically it has a lot of shit things. The cool thing is, you might never come across any of them. The bad thing is, I think you will. So, my first problem that I noticed early on, and is the one that is still the most egregious to me, is input delays and input drops. I'm playing this on a 360 using a controller. I understand the 360's D-pad is temperamental at times, but I also understand when it's not the pad. There is a 5-second delay to putting your sword in the sheath or out of the sheath every so often. For the most, it can be fine and normal and okay, but every so often it takes forever for it to happen. And this can be a problem, because if you accidentally pull your sword out in a town, by the time it takes the game to put the sword back away, because what will happen is, and I'll tell you a little story. I pulled the sword out in Vergen, guards got pissed off at me, I was trying to put it away, and because it wasn't happening, and because it was dropping the input, and the input was delayed, when I did put it away, he pulled it back out because I'd pressed the D-pad and it had done more than one input. So, I ended up pissing the guards off, and I ended up having to pay a massive fine, because I had to kill the guards or they would have killed me, all because of control issues that should not exist. Combos will drop. When you're in mid-combo, sometimes a move will not come out because it drops the input, and you can get hit, you can get countered, you can get killed. Very frustrating. Sometimes the character doesn't roll when you press roll. You know, it drops the input. It sounds like a slight thing, but it can be massive on dark mode, because dark mode is very hard. So, it's I don't know why this kind of stuff exists, but it's worse on the sword. And it culminates in a stupid last boss. Because what happens is, Geralt starts a fight with a sword in the sheath, and he can't attack when his sword is in the sheath. He can't roll, he can't use magic, he can't do anything until he pulls the sword out. And because it spawns you really close to the final boss, and he has his sword in his sheath, you do not have the time to pull the sword out, or run before you pull the sword out to evade the boss's first hit. So, the last boss begins by getting a cheeky hit on you from the checkpoint the game gives you. And obviously because it's a fight, you can't save before it, you can't save during it, and before it you have to go through the dialogue tree every time. So if you use the autosave, which is the one that most people will use, it will fuck you. And it doesn't do it every time, because I managed to get away without being hit because the AI hesitated, but you're essentially at the mercy of the capricious AI that does what it wants. And that's the last boss. It just shouldn't exist. It's something that shouldn't happen in modern gaming, and that has to be a PC thing, because I like to think if this was a console specific thing, that wouldn't be the case, because they would have thought more about the autosaves, they would have thought more about checkpoints, and this wouldn't be a problem. But it's the kind of thing that slips through the net when you're on such an ambitious project. So just be aware, input drops do happen, input delay is there, and it is frustrating, but you have to deal with it, guys, because it's not you, it's not your controller, it is the game. And maybe on PC this has been patched, I don't know, but on console it fucking ain't. So thank you for watching, and you take care now.